right, so internal and external validity as it relates to ABAB design. So Gaston Ledford does a really nice job of summarizing common threats to internal validity and then methods to detect and control for those threats. That's in Table 9.1. He has several key areas. Please refer to that table and be able to identify common threats as well as what to do to avoid those threats as much as possible. A couple key notes on internal validity. Every time we replicate the AB baseline intervention conditions, internal validity results are strengthened. So every time you replicate it and find those that change in behavior due to the condition, the results are strengthened. If the magnitude of change in the dependent variable is immediate and abrupt, the internal validity of the independent variable is strengthened. So if you look at this graph down here, you can see that with condition A and B, following that phase change line, there is an abrupt change in behavior. So that's what it's talking about. There's an immediate and abrupt change, meaning that this internal validity is pretty strong. You can also find a functional relationship using with gradual reversal in trend and when there's a return to baseline levels, not necessarily the same to initial baseline. However, with that said, if you have data showing that, you'll probably want to ensure that you increase the duration of baseline conditions so that you can see a stable trend prior to going into condition B and implementing again. So it's not as strong as a relationship, but you can find that functional relationship when there isn't as immediate or an abrupt change, but it can happen. Gaston Ledford also provides visual analysis examples using Appendix 9.1, so he'll talk about how to look at these graphs in more depth and analyze them. But again, the graphs that I have copy and pasted into the lecture, these are just really nice looking withdrawal design graphs. You'll see that clear and abrupt change in behavior between conditions. And then with baseline 1 versus baseline 2, the behavior goes back to similar frequency. With external validity, so basically external validity is only achieved when cause and effect relationships are replicated across similar participants under the same conditions, all of that good stuff. Many researchers, because of this, will use at least 3 or more participants in their study so that they can strengthen that external validity as well. You'll also want to assess for response generalization, so you'll want to monitor behaviors that are functionally or topographically equivalent. The example here is if we're evaluating on-task behaviors, such as completing assignment in class, we'd also evaluate other on-task behaviors, such as looking at teacher, sitting in your seat, etc., to ensure generalization is occurring. You'll also want to monitor behaviors that are not functionally or topographically equivalent, so the opposite, right? So if we're evaluating that same on-task behavior, we'd also want to look at off-task behavior and how that's affected by our baseline and intervention conditions.